Okay, so the name for this, the name for this video is only slightly misleading. Um, I see Black Lives Matters out there fighting for our rights, ours. This isn't just for black people. This is for all of us. That's why I don't agree with the name, and I believe it's racist. However, all of the white people that are out there supporting Black Lives Matters, I want to thank you. All right, you are following a long legacy in this country of sticking up for them. A long legacy of white folks willing to fight and die for their rights. Because those are supposed to be your rights too. And I understand not everybody was doing it peacefully. I don't have to agree with your methods. The fact is, we have gotten past the point of there not being bodies. Okay, there have been bodies my entire life, and for many, many, many decades before I was ever born. Ashley Coffey's typing on the side. She typed, "Hi, darling. Glad to see you today." We need to be a little bit more grateful, right? I hear that a lot. Or people need to quit getting so offended. Well, let's take a look at what people are getting offended over. I mean, we got a bunch of black folks who are quite offended that police officers can kill them at will and get away with it. Or for the most part, especially recently. There has been a lot of crackdown on it. The stuff that's been going on in Colorado, many of the officers that I had to deal with in specific were involved in many other crimes in 2018. Officer Waylon Lolatai assaulted 6 more people in 2018. The only 3 that anybody really gave a shit about were the ones where they could call it racist. There's a lot of white folks who are sticking up for these black folks here in America, and many others, by the way. And I know you guys catch a lot of guff from both sides. You catch guff from one side because you're white. You catch the other set of bullshit because you're sticking up for, well, human beings. And that's really what you're doing, and I want to thank you for that. Yes, you are acknowledging that these are very much race issues, but they're not just race issues. Race is a byproduct of the actual crimes against humanity that are being committed here. See, while you guys are offended by things, you're offended by curse words. You're offended by a man who defends himself against a woman, even if she's twice his size. He got beat up by a girl. You don't have to hit somebody to defend you, by the way. Most of the time for me, the people trying to beat me up weren't big enough to do any major damage, so I just covered up. I saw a lot of white people out there with the tear gas. I did. I saw a lot of white people out with the crowd, inhaling that very same crap. People want to talk about how some of these folks are getting violent. Who wouldn't? If this happened to your kids, yeah, you'd get violent. For goddamn sure. Well, those of you who are not cowards, because I hear many people say shit like that, but comes down to it, no, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. We hear stories every so often of people who actually did that, though. Like people who walked into court and killed the guy who molested their kid, and in some cases got away with it, and in some cases did not. We have the opportunity here to work towards a more utopian society. There is no reason for us to have this many people in America that we feel the need to victimize. And then a lot of people saying, oh, well, they should stop bitching, bunch of snowflakes and so on and so forth. No, when people are bitching about the right shit that's supposed to be covered by the Constitution of the United States of America, don't tell me how American you are flying a non-American flag of a bunch of fucking traitors who wanted to own human beings and then force their own people into slavery. Yes, the South enslaved nearly every white male in the South to fight that war. And these Southern folks don't want to remember that. They don't want to remember that less than 1% of the people who lived in the South actually owned a slave. They say it's about states' right. What right? The right to own people? A lot of Southerners didn't have enough money to get a pair of shoes. Most Southerners at that time did not have the money for a pair of shoes. But today we pretend it's this big heritage, although really it's just a bunch of poor people fighting and dying for some rich assholes, for some property owners. That's history, folks. That's what wars are fought over. Property. It's human property, adult property, female property, male property, child property, or physical property, such as this here bottle of hot sauce. That physical bottle of hot sauce is my property. And we're dealing with a lot of stuff with the workforce where, yeah, the workforce is not making enough to even live on. And then they have to worry about not having enough money for insurance, because although insurance for their children is expensive for them, it's inexpensive for people who work for the state. And then there's the added expense of paying someone who works for the state, someone who is probably not regulated well enough. So instead of helping out a single mom with $285 a month for insurance, you'll pay somebody else $1,175 a month, plus pay for the insurance. Does that make sense? You call them an unfit parent because they can't earn enough at a 40-hour-a-week job. That's not acceptable. But the major thing is that, yeah, these are human lives, people who are being killed. Having 6 people in 1 week, 6 black people hung in trees in the United States in 1 week. And we want to talk about how the Civil War was over how long ago? There's no such thing as racism. You're out your damn mind. But if there's black folks who come here to Chapel, Nebraska, anybody pulls a gun on them, I'll stand between that gun and them. That shit ain't right. Although coming here to Chapel, Nebraska might not be the best idea because there's a bunch of racists here too. Of course, I've been trying to get a busload of black people here to Chapel, Nebraska for years. That's not a joke. There's a few people that I've had that conversation with, and a few people on Facebook who I've got that in Messenger with. I always wanted to get a bunch of black people here to Chapel, Nebraska. when people are all being racist and stupid. Yeah, but are you going to be like that if there's an actual black person there? A lot of these people never seen a black person. We have black people that come in to town that work for the railroad, and some of them that work for the Department of Roads. And sometimes they stop at Pumpkin Pantry or Hanson's Texaco, but other than that, not much. A lot of these younger folks, they've seen black people on TV. Their parents watch TV, but that's about it. Like, if I get Todd and a bunch of his friends down here, like, yeah, that's a different group of people altogether. That's not this boys in the hood crowd, but it also ain't no fucking. Y'all remember Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel Air? Yeah, he ain't no Carlton either. This is a real human being. He's been through some shit. He knows some shit. He knows some people. Anyway, y'all be safe. I want to thank the folks who are out there marching with Black Lives Matter, whether you are black or white. I recognize you're fighting for my rights, and I'm going to keep pushing for Breonna's law to become legal. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I don't know if I am or not because I've only read it. I haven't heard her name spoken. And I suppose I'd go through some news articles, but the news always gives me a bad taste because I watch the news, and sometimes when I watch the news, I find myself disliking someone who I wasn't there for their situation. And I go, you know what? That was fucked up. It's fucked up in my situation that I had to go through that and all the evil shit that people did to me. Because, like me, if I see somebody on the internet, or on TV who's accused of something, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to get on my computer and get a hold of them and start accusing them of stuff and threatening them and shit like that. Like, those are the real psychos. And the thing is, the FBI could find those psychos just by, well, looking at my Facebook and looking at my YouTube. The kind of people who are actually willing to do things, not just talk about it, but actually do terrible things to others. This is a good way to pick them out of the woodwork. Now, a lot of the stuff that I am in trouble for is for doing it back to the people who started this. And no, I haven't done most of the extremely terrible things. Train. Actually, rather, I haven't done any of the extremely terrible things. But I have done some things that are considered illegal, because they are, and some things that are considered immoral if you only look at one side. But really, you need to look at the fact that before I ever started cursing at people and treating people the way that I was getting treated, I had tried nicely first. I had tried nicely. I had tried going to the authorities. I had tried going to the source, and I had tried asking the people who were actually swinging at me to stop. Like, hey, dude, I just want to see my brother. Leave me alone. Alicia knows what that feels like now. She knows what it's like and will know for the rest of her life what it's like to wish that she could see her sibling and can't. Now, the reason that I wasn't living in Boulder after all that stuff, a lot of people were like, "Oh, dude, you're a fucking coward. You're afraid of this and you're afraid of that." And I'm like, it's a total package thing. But if I get assaulted, I automatically go to jail. The person who assaulted me automatically gets away with it. They're allowed to make a report. I'm called mentally ill and prevented from making one. I have to sit the time out. They do this with anybody who is considered mentally ill, whether they are or not. So for me, a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're a pussy. You just couldn't handle it." I'm like, no, I could handle it. I didn't want to and shouldn't have to. I mean, if I'm in that scenario, I got two choices. I can either let them wail on me for as long as they want, or I can go to jail. Those are my two choices. People are like, you chose this, you chose this, you chose this. Well, what part? Did I choose the options that I had to choose between? No, those were wherever and whenever. When the opportunities came to try to get something done, that's what I did. And if it didn't end up being the opportunity that it was supposed to be or that people told me it was going to be, I did the best that I could with what I had. We can change the world for the better. We just have to work together. To those two guys who were accused of being with the KKK and being with some sort of racist agenda to kill black people because they were protecting a business, I am really sorry that people did that to you. I saw the picture. I saw where there was white people and black people with firearms protecting that business. And what was said about you that made you a target, that is so messed up. And I am so sorry that that happened to you. You did not deserve that. And I did notice that you were being intelligent. You and all of your buddies seemed to be trained more than just, well, watching TV because you weren't pointing your firearms near. You were pointing them at the ground. What goes up must come down. You shoot it into the ground, you're less likely to kill somebody. Plus, the ground is more likely to absorb it than to ricochet as a building would. I also noticed that their fingers were not on the triggers. I noticed that their firearms were strapped in front of them. They were in clear view of everyone. They were not concealed, and they weren't shouting racial slurs. They were having a conversation with two other human beings who happened to have a different skin color. Matter of fact, if you look at the two black guys, their skin color or skin tone ain't the same. And if you look at the two white guys, their skin tone ain't the same. So if they ain't even the same color as another white person, if a white person is not the same color as another white person, why are we judging skin tone? It's the quality of a person's character, not the color of their skin, that needs to matter here. We have seen all throughout history, yes, there have been terrible men, terrible women, terrible Africans, terrible Europeans, terrible Asians, terrible both North and South Americans are these really terrible people. Some of them are terrible people, some of them did terrible things. And a lot of them, other people did terrible things in their name, which is even worse. I've had a lot of people do terrible things to me in the name of Natalie, in the name of Natalie's family and their predators. Screw the police. We got to look out for each other, folks. The police are not out for our best interest. They're not looking out for us. They're harming homeless people, most of whom are former foster kids, the most victimized people in America. And you make them victims for the police just by allowing these crappy laws that allow these people, these are human beings doing these terrible things by profiting off of broke folk. I grew up in the system. I can tell you, yes, I cannot deny in any way, shape, or form that there is a disproportionate number of black people in the system compared to out here. Whether that, well, usually mental hospitals, it's mostly white kids. Lockup facilities, that's mostly black kids and people who, well, the long and short of it, you are more likely to go to jail or prison if you're black. You're more likely to be pulled over if you're black. You're more likely to be assaulted if you're black. Unless you're in the system, in which case being a white boy might be a real scary thing. A lot of times that whole protection thing that you think you get just for being white, you get in there and you realize, yeah, fucking don't nobody like you. You're a fucking noob. Don't nobody know you. You're from the outs. You don't know how it works. You don't know the rules, and you probably ain't gonna know to keep your nasty cock beaters to yourself. Because some people will fucking beat your ass just for touching them on accident. Anyway, we've already identified the problems. And if y'all want to pretend that those don't exist, they're not happening because they're not happening to you. Keep in mind that they could happen to you because you're allowing it to happen to others here in the United States that you claim to hold so dear.